Welcome to Ifa Stories, where ancient wisdom meets modern storytelling. Step into the sacred world of Ifa, the Yoruba spiritual system, where every tale carries the power of divination, destiny, and deep cultural insight. Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the Orishas, the divine forces guiding our paths, Orunmila, the Erinmoles, and many more. Each story is a bridge between the past and the present, weaving timeless lessons that inspire, enlighten, and transform. Embrace the wisdom, honor the tradition, and journey with us into the heart of Ifa. Subscribe now and let the stories guide you. OGÚNDÁ MÉJİ cures the infertility of OLOFÄN's wives. The king of OLOFÄ was worried because his 3 wives had been pregnant for a long time, but could not give birth. He had sought the help of all the Bàbáláwos, priests of Ifa, from the surrounding areas, but without results. In the meantime, he learned of the existence of a Bàbáláwo named OGÚNDÁ MÉJİ, who was living alone in a village called OLOFÄ, on the road to Ejisa. This priest had been forced into seclusion in the village after being declared persona non grata in the town of Itoko, where he had lived since birth. His success as a Bàbáláwo had been praised everywhere, but it had also earned him the enmity of older Awas, priests, who had lived in Tikek Kaos before him. Previously, he had prepared a soap for good fortune for the king of If, which the king commonly shared with his 3 hunters. The soap helped the hunters return from the forest with good game, but did not help his wives deliver their pregnancies. The names of the 3 hunters were Rastas, Rastas, Atamatas. One day, the 3 went into the forest on a hunting expedition. The first hunter shot an elephant among the trees, and the elephant made its way to the town to die in the king's courtyard. When the elephant was cut open, a human child with a crown on his head and beads on his limbs was found in its stomach. The second hunter shot a buffalo in the forest, and it also made its way to the palace to die in the same spot. When it was dissected, a wooden bowl with 2 compartments and 16 Ikan Ifa seeds, on each side was found inside. The third hunter shot a deer, which also came to die in the same place. When it was opened, its stomach revealed a agba, gourd, containing a magical wand, as. The king was clearly confused. He wondered what message these strange events were meant to deliver. He took out his own Ifa tray and cast divination. The Odu that appeared was OGÚNDÁ MÉJÍ. At that moment, he sent messages to all the Awos in his kingdom to come interpret the meaning of these events and the Odu that had appeared. They all tried but failed to interpret the meaning of the strange happenings. As each failed, they were chained and imprisoned in the palace dungeon. Every Bàbáláwo in the empire suffered the same fate, until none remained. Then the king remembered the Awo, who had once prepared the soap of good fortune for him, although no one seemed to remember his name. However, some reported that the only Awo left in the kingdom was OGÚNDÁ MÉJÍ, who lived in isolation on the road to Ejisa, in a village called Yilu Kogun. The king immediately ordered that the man be brought to the palace without delay. This happened to coincide with the day OGÚNDÁ MÉJÍ was performing Bori, serving his head. While the royal messengers were crossing a river to find him, they came across the 3 adult princesses of OLOFÄ, who were washing clothes by the river. The young women were of marrying age, but had sworn to marry only the man or men who knew their names. They were only known and addressed as the princesses. The 2 royal messengers greeted them and continued their journey. Upon arriving in the village of OGÚNDÁ MÉJÍ, they discovered he had just finished serving his head, and the soup and iyan, pounded yam, were being prepared. They delivered the royal message, summoning him to Ife immediately. Soon after, they stood up to leave, but their host insisted they eat the pounded yam before departing. They sat and ate until full. OGÚNDÁ MÉJÍ then offered them fresh palm wine to drink, and finally gave them obi, kola nuts, as a sign of respect. After enjoying his hospitality, the messengers decided to tell him why the king was summoning him, so that he wouldn't end up in chains like the other Awas. First, they revealed the names of the king's 3 daughters, who had sworn only to marry the man who could say their names. They told him that if he wished to take new wives, he could marry the 3 young women by pronouncing their names. Ibo Ru, Ibo Ye, Ibo Sishe. This incident explains why Runmala does not forbid marrying more than one wife from the same house or family. Next, they told him the king wanted him to interpret the meaning of the strange discoveries in the entrails of the 3 animals hunted by the royal hunters on the same day. Since even they didn't know the meaning, they warned him to be prepared to unravel the mystery that had baffled all the Awas of the empire and who were now chained in prison. They asked him to keep it a secret. He thanked them for everything and asked that they tell the king he was serving his head, but would arrive the following day. As soon as the messengers left, he took out his ifa seeds and consulted. He was told to offer a he-goat to Asu, and to carry obi, kola nuts, and ripe plantains on his journey. He was also instructed to be generous to anyone he met along the way, as the solution to the mystery would be given to him during the journey to If. He did exactly as advised. He departed for If early the next morning. Just before reaching the last stretch of forest before Ifa, he met an old woman sitting by the roadside. She looked miserable and hungry. She called out and begged for food, saying she hadn't eaten in 3 days. He gave her roasted ripe plantain and water from his satchel. After she ate and drank, he gave her obi and his remaining provisions. The woman thanked him. As he prepared to leave, she asked where he was headed. He replied that he had been summoned for a mission at the king's palace in If. The woman told him that victory and success awaited him in If. She said he had been invited to reveal why the 3 wives of OLOFÄ, who had been pregnant for a long time, had not given birth. Explain the meaning of the elephant, buffalo, and deer, shot by Ristas, Raistas, and Automatas, respectively, but who all came to die at the palace gate. Interpret the message carried by the mysterious objects found in the entrails of the 3 animals. And if he chose to marry new wives, to reveal the names of OLOFÄN's 3 adult daughters. She warned him that the first thing he must do upon arrival at the palace was to order the execution of an old witch who often sat at the palace gate. This woman had the power to cloud the memory and knowledge of all Awas who entered the palace, which explained why the previous ones had failed. The old woman advised him to have her killed with a club before entering, as she was responsible for all the misfortunes plaguing the empire. Next, he was to order the release of all the imprisoned Awas, and proclaim that no Babalawo should ever be shackled or imprisoned, for any town that chained a Babalawo would suffer unrest. Then he was to enter the palace. The first people to greet him would be the king's 3 daughters. They would kneel before him, and he was to respond by greeting them by name. Ibo Ru, Ibo Ye, Ibo Sishe. As soon as he was in the presence of OLOFÄ, the king would ask him to interpret the Odu Ifa that had appeared on the tray, and to explain why his 3 pregnant wives had not given birth for over 3 years. He was to begin by telling the king that his 3 wives were not actually pregnant at all. One of them had a termite nest, called Odidimade in Yorùbá and OLOFÄ in Benin, in her stomach. The second had a swarm of ants inside her, and the third had alubosa omi, a water yam, in her womb. Then he would move on to explain the animals and the mysterious contents of their stomachs. He should state that the king had 3 hunters whom he allowed to use the soap meant solely for royal fortune as a hunting charm. This misuse angered the king of the forest, who filled the wombs of the king's wives with these unnatural materials, because he preferred forest creatures over human children. He would then reveal that the elephant, buffalo, and deer that came to die at the palace were the king of the forest's final warning. Enough was enough. Next, he was to interpret the contents of the animal's entrails as follows. A. The human child with a crown and beads found in the elephant's stomach was a message that soon the king would no longer have elders to advise him, only young people. B. The Ifa tray with 32 seeds found in the buffalo's stomach was a divine message that Runmala was the deity the king must always consult to reveal the future. C. The gourd with Asi, found in the deer's stomach, meant that no other king would match OLOFÄ in fame, power, and influence. When he bowed to thank the old woman, she had vanished, disappeared into the air. He then continued his journey and soon arrived at the palace. Upon arrival, the sequence of events was slightly reversed. The 3 princesses were outside the palace walls, hanging clothes to dry. As soon as he saw them, he greeted them warmly, calling them by name. Good morning, Ibo Ru, Ibo Ye, Ibo Sishe. They dropped their laundry and rushed to embrace him, saying that they had finally found a husband. They immediately offered themselves to him in marriage. When he told them he had a task to complete at the palace, they revealed that they were the king's daughters and would go with him to announce him as their husband. When he reached the gate of OLOFÄN's palace, he stood outside and called for the king to come out. He declared that the old woman sitting at the gate must be struck dead with a club, for she alone was responsible for all the misfortunes plaguing the king and his empire. The woman was immediately beaten to death, and her body was carried away. After that, he walked with the king to the palace's inner chamber, where OLOFÄ showed him the Odù Ifá that had appeared in the divination. It was his own Odù. He told the king that there were 16 Awos imprisoned in the palace, not because they lacked the knowledge to interpret the Odù, but because the witch had bewitched them. Her presence had clouded their minds and memory the moment they passed her at the gate. That is why they forgot everything upon entering the palace. He told the king that imprisoning a Bàbáláwo was forbidden, and that they must be released immediately. The king ordered the release of all the Awos, and had them brought to the palace's outer chamber. Then, OGÚNDÁ MÉJÌ turned back to the Odù on the Ifá tray, and asked that the 3 royal hunters be summoned. Orihwarstas, who had shot the elephant that died in the palace courtyard, with a human child, a crown, and beads inside. OGÚNDÁ MÉJÌ told OLOFÄ that this meant if he didn't offer a sacrifice, the elders of the kingdom would begin to die one by one, leaving only the youth behind. Aristas, who had shot the buffalo that carried the Ifá tray and 32 seeds in its stomach. He said this was a message from Ranmala, advising the king to always consult Ifá to solve his problems. Using those seeds for divination, he would always find solutions. Atamatas, who had shot the deer with the gourd of As, called Oguriboje in Yorùbá and Ekwae in Benin. He told the king that this meant no other king after him would match his fame, authority, or influence. Then he questioned the king for allowing the soap of good fortune, meant only for royal use, to be used by hunters. He explained that the king of the forest had sent the animals to warn him to stop using spiritual medicine for hunting. If the king didn't know already, the forest spirit preferred animals over children. That's why the children of his wives had turned into a termite mound, a swarm of ants, and a water yam. He revealed that once the king stopped using the soap for hunting, his wives would give birth to normal human children. Everyone rose in ovation for OGÚNDÁ MÉJÌ, and he was carried on shoulders in a grand procession throughout the city. He was proclaimed the most skilled Bàbáláwo OLOFÄ had seen in recent times. Upon returning to the palace, he told the king that in order to restore peace to Iafy, the imprisoned Awos must be appeased, with a goat each. The king agreed without hesitation. The Awos, in gratitude, offered their goats to OGÚNDÁ MÉJÌ, but he refused. He told them to serve their own Ifá with the goats, but after sacrificing them, they should say it was OGÚNDÁ MÉJÌ who killed the animals, not themselves. This has become an Ifá tradition until today. The king rewarded him with abundant gifts, and gave him his 3 daughters in marriage, who had already proclaimed him their husband. He was also made Balogun of Ifá, the highest chieftaincy title beneath the king.